بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. We greet you on this, the 21st day of the month of Jumadil Akhirah with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I want to return one more time to Russia and Ukraine. And I'm doing this because I feel a certain weariness coming down on me. I'm feeling weary, I'm feeling tired, I need rest, and I don't know. It is Allah who knows when He's going to take me away from this world. I don't know if I'll live long enough to travel again. And so I want to record this video in order to ensure it may reach you before Allah calls me away. When Allah spoke in Surah Al-Kahf, remember Surah Al-Kahf of the Quran, the Surah of the cave, is the only surah about which Allah's Messenger said it's connected with Dajjal. The only surah. So this is a surah of paramount importance for Akhir Zaman. He said, recite the first 3 or the first 10 or the last 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf for protection from the fitna of Dajjal. And secondly, this is the surah which introduces the subject of Gog and Magog. And so this surah is par excellence the surah of Akhir Zaman or eschatology. And this surah helps us to understand what is happening in Russia and Ukraine at this time. But you need some insight, and you need to be able to devote proper study to the subject. And this is what I'm sharing with you in this brief video, because I don't know if I'll live to deliver the lecture in Birmingham. Inshallah. Remember that there are 2 kinds of verses in the Quran by Allah's wisdom. There are those verses which are plain and clear and must not be interpreted. They are the muhkamat. But there are other verses which have to be interpreted. How do you know which verse is muhkamat, which verse is mutashabihat? Answer, it is with insight, not only rational faculty, but in addition to that, knowledge which comes internally. And this is the model of scholarship of Khidr alayhi salam. Because Allah says, بَعْدَ أُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. I'll devote, if Allah allows me to reach Edinburgh, and I get a chance to deliver that lecture in Edinburgh about Khidr and the new model of scholarship in Akhir Zaman, I'll devote the time to explain it more adequately. So when do we know when a verse of the Quran is muhkama and when it is mutashabihat? It is with insight. And in Surah Al-Kahf we are introduced to Qarnayn. Qarnayn, of course, can mean 2 horns. And those who choose to accept 2 horns, well then let them explain the subject as they choose. But we say, since Allah has never used the word qarn to mean a horn in the Quran, never, and the word qarn occurs in the Quran maybe a dozen or more times. In the Quran, the word qarn always means a people, a generation, an epoch. So our view is that Qarnayn means 2 periods of time, 2 people, 2 generations. And the Quran proceeded to speak about the first qarn, but not about the second. And in the first qarn, Dhul Qarnayn travels to the setting of the sun, meaning to the west. If the sun is ever to rise from the west, of course, you have to change the Quran. Would you not? You have to say, no, Dhul Qarnayn didn't travel this way, he traveled that way. For those who say that the sun will rise from the west, literally. Remember, you're going to have to change the geography of the Quran when you come with that stupidity. No. He traveled in the direction of the setting of the sun, and in the Quran the sun sets in the west. The sun does not rise in the west, it sets in the west. And then he traveled in the direction, and there, of course, he came across a body of water which was dark and murky. And then he went in the other direction, and there he had to another body of water because he has to stop. He can't go indefinitely. And there he came across upon a people who did not have anything to protect them other than what nature had ordained. And so they are vulnerable people. They are a vulnerable people. They are a vulnerable people. You have to help them. They're going to suffer a lot, these people, in the rising of the sun. Let me repeat it one more time. For those of you who have a capacity to think, because I'm not going to say more on this subject. My teacher used to say, may Allah have mercy on his soul. He says, I'm not going to put you on my back and climb the mountain. I'm not going to do that. He says, I'll teach you to climb the mountain. And so the same thing, I'm not going to tell you everything on this subject. But these are a vulnerable people who will always, always, always be suffering. And even now they're suffering. This is the geography of the Quran. And then he travels to it, and he left them as they were, so they still remain in that vulnerable state. And then he traveled to a third direction, to a pass between two mountains. My question is this muhkamat or mutashabihat? Is this geography that is muhkamat? Are these mountains to be interpreted, or do we accept it as muhkamat? And my answer is, this is muhkamat. This does not need interpretation. These mountains are fixed and they are there. And that geography does not change. And then Gog and Magog are located behind the barrier that he built in the Caucasus Mountains, the Darial Gorge. This is fixed and firm. You don't need any interpretation of these verses. And when he built the barrier, Gog and Magog were contained, or I like the use of the word checkmated. They cannot harm anyone anymore. They're no longer a significant actor on the stage of the world. They are no longer. I hope NATO is listening. I hope NATO is listening. They are no longer a significant actor on the stage of the world. They no longer have any strategic importance. They are peripheral now in importance because they have been contained as though they are put into a cage. And so now, the Prophet said that when Gog and Magog are released from behind that barrier, when he collapses the barrier, and this happened in the lifetime of the Prophet, the evidence is there that the barrier was brought down in the lifetime of the Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him. That Gog and Magog will travel to Jerusalem. And on the way to Jerusalem, they'll pass by the Sea of Galilee and drink the water. Now this is not muhkamat. You don't have to look for a people who will be by the Sea of Galilee and they'll be drinking the water, literally. This is common sense. This is not insight. This is elementary common sense. This is mutashabihat, meaning they will be consuming the water, using the water of the Sea of Galilee to make the desert green. Now then, check out your geography. if they are passing by the Sea of Galilee on their way to Jerusalem, they're coming from the north of the Holy Land. Check out your geography. North of the Holy Land, where do you find a body of water which is dark and murky? There are only two bodies of water north of the Holy Land to the west. One is the Mediterranean Sea, and the visibility is about 5-6 meters. You could see underneath. But north of the Mediterranean Sea is the Black Sea, and that's why it is called the Black Sea, because all the algae make visibility very shallow. That's why it's called the Black Sea. That's why the Quran called it Aynun Hamiyah. So we can identify the Black Sea with the first journey of Dhul Qarnayn. And therefore, on the other side, it will be the Caspian Sea. And in between, it will be the Caucasus Mountains. This is geography. This is muhkamat. And so when the second Qarn of Qarnayn is to come, where do you search for evidence that we now have the second Qarn? Answer, at the Black Sea. And if you know any geography, Crimea commands the Black Sea. Crimea, the peninsula of Crimea, commands the Black Sea. For those who have been my critics, I pray, from amongst them, that there will be those who will still be able to emerge and become scholars of it amongst my critics. But there are others. What can you do? We can't change them. So I'm hoping that even amongst my critics, there'll be some who will be able to get some nur and be able to recognize that the second Qarn of Qarnayn is now with us. It has started. Because power has now returned to the region of the Black Sea. Since Russia recovered Crimea, and now commands the whole of the Black Sea. The second Qarn has come because Russia has power bestowed on it by Allah. And that power is now resting on the foundations of faith, because Russia is returning to her Orthodox Christian heart. There are those critics who will never accept, because they hate Russia, because Russia defeated them in Syria and in Iraq. They hate Russia. So leave them. But the rest of you, including my critics, who can still see, you can recognize, yes, Russia is indeed returning to her Orthodox Christian heart. Do I have to give you the evidence when the evidence is so plain and clear, anybody can see it? Russia is returning to her Orthodox Christian heart. And so this video is to say to you that the second Qarn of Qarnayn will do the same thing that the first Qarn did. And that is that Gog and Magog are going to be checkmated in the second Qarn. And so Russia cannot lose the war in Ukraine. This is the substance of my talk. That Russia, it is impossible. Russia cannot lose this war in Ukraine. Russia does not have to win the war, defeat Ukraine. Russia simply has to contain Gog and Magog, so that they pose no threat to Russia, and they can no longer oppress the Russian-speaking people in the south of Ukraine. Since Russia cannot be defeated in Ukraine, we say to you, this is Islamic eschatology. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.